Thank you, listeners, for joining us for today's Elko Live here on KELK. Today's the day we set aside to get caught up on local law enforcement news and issues, and we're so pleased to welcome in studio our Elko City Police Lt. Rick Moore, who joins us today. And Rick, it's always a pleasure to get to visit with you, and thanks for coming on the air with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Rick, we should maybe introduce you a bit to folks who may not know your background. I know that you were elevated to the position of lieutenant fairly recently, and but you've been a very successful detective with the Elko Police Department. Anything else that you'd like people to know?
Yeah, I was promoted to lieutenant March 1st. I've been with the department approximately right at 23 years. In that time, approximately about 10 years in patrol and 11 years in investigations.
So thank you very much for, like you said, about 20 years of you've seen a lot of changes in Elko, and it's always nice to see people with your dedication and your passion for your career to earn a promotion like that. And obviously, we appreciate that our city police department likes to promote from within and also provides the training necessary for you to be elevated that way. So thank you.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to go over the recent police department's 2022 annual report. This summary was given to the Elko City Council during Tuesday's meeting. We should mention that the police chief is out of town and he's on business on behalf of the department. And Under Sheriff Justin Ames is the only sheriff's administrator in town right now, so he is holding down the fort literally and heading up operations at the Elko County Sheriff's Office. And Sheriff Narvaez's also away. He's on another task right now too. So it is springtime and people are ramping up. We were just talking about that. People are getting busy again. So among the things that we could talk about, I guess, first of all, a reflection of how our department is doing crime-wise, maybe some of the statistics as compared to last year. We saw that there were some increases in some categories, Lieutenant, but in other places it seems as though maybe things are improving a bit. Would that be fair to say?
They are, and this is a published annual report, and if you want to come down to the police department, we can give this out. Fairly comprehensive. It covers, our staffing issues, licensing. I mean, pretty much every single division that we have statistics and measures of where we've gone historically and where we're going in the future with this. So.
The severe crimes in the city of Elko totaled 1,654 during the year 2022, and that's down 440 incidents from the 2021 figure severe crime. Obviously, severe crimes are what most people would consider murder and manslaughter, kidnapping, forcible rape, robbery, assault, arson. There are several other categories, including theft from a building. There are several categories of theft as well as fraud and even animal cruelty, I think, which is a new type of severe crime category, maybe is designated by the legislature, Lieutenant?
Yeah, and the thing with the reporting is, this is what's actually being reported to us. We have to understand that. If people aren't reporting this, that does affect the statistics. But we can show what has been reported. We can show where we're being effective in trying to lower these severe crime totals.
And something that the chief, Ty Troughton, described during the council meeting on Tuesday is that some of the numbers may be lower because there has simply been the ability to emphasize or to focus on crime suppression in some cases. A crime suppression unit was started, and maybe, Lieutenant, you can walk us through that a little bit about what that unit is comprised of.
Yeah, so this is called the Crime Suppression Unit, CSU. This has been a brainchild of ours, and that we've been pushing for years and years. It's really come down to a manpower staffing issue that hasn't got it off the ground. This discussion has probably taken a decade. And the decision was finally made that we have to pull the trigger and get this going because across the nation, law enforcement is, the resources are dwindling, is what it comes down to. So we have to be more effective with what we have. Crime Suppression Unit is a way to be more surgical in our application, driven by intelligence and try to, target the areas that, people are seeing quality of life crimes. Suppression of quality of life crimes, lead to suppression of more severe crimes, and we have the numbers to bear that out.
Yeah, that was presented to the City Council, and I know that they were very appreciative. As you talked about, in intelligence gathering, sometimes that takes time. It's literally putting pieces together, and as a 10-year detective, I'm sure, Lieutenant Moore, you could describe to people how much more help, I guess, you could use from the public. And one thing that I've noticed, even just in social media, perusing social media, people have a tendency to want to describe something that happened to them, and they'll describe the account on social media, and whether or not it's maybe slightly exaggerated or an inflated fear, it tends to do a couple of things. I mean, it might make other people fearful, but then at the same time, if they're not reporting it to proper authorities, then it doesn't prevent that from happening to someone else.
That's right, and we have seen that. It does lead potentially to more fear if it's unbased. We always want the information. We have to be able to flesh that out. If there is something that on its face appears baseless, we have to know about it to be able to get to the root of it to see if it is in fact baseless. And, we're nothing without the public, giving us this information and helping out. So, the more information that we have, the better. We have enacted online crime reporting this through the Elko's website, or Elko City's website. That's helped out quite a bit. Some people are reticent to call in and talk, directly to a police officer, but they're able to give us, that either through our Facebook page. We're about to launch a new Elko PD app, so that'll be something that people will be able to provide information on, and our online crime reporting system.
So a new app, that will be helpful. People do like their mobile devices, and anything that provides another tool. People tend to like to text versus phone calls.
Absolutely.
Especially younger people. Or they can take photographs and send in photographs of something, or license plates or something like that. That can also be helpful.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to send something in. If there's nothing there, then there's nothing there. We can get to the bottom of it. But it's better to be, safe than sorry.
Right. And you're not making a false report. You're simply providing some information that police can follow up on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's it.
So you should be reassured. We've also seen that the police department, along with other agencies and entities, have collaborated on enhancing our 911 operations, right? And that's
correct. That's a work in progress. That's been years in the making. I can't tell you exactly where we're at with that process, but it is coming along.
Has it made a difference in the way you're able to police, would you say?
It's starting to. We're beginning to see some of the fruition of that. There's been, like I said, a lot of back work and putting in the infrastructure needed to go forward into the future with this. Right now, we're starting to get some of the fruits of our labor on that.
That's good. I know when our previous city manager, Curtis Calder, retired, that was really a personal goal of his to leave that in good shape, that system, so that it will carry us into the future, and we'll have enhanced 911 certainly. In other areas of crime, I think most everyone that we talk to on this program in an official capacity agrees that drugs really drive a lot of types of crime and abuse and violence.
They do. So we were talking about the Crime Suppression Unit, and they focus a lot on property crimes, and a lot of our property crimes have a nexus to drug crimes. They're fueling, the drug addiction, that kind of thing. And so all these go hand in hand. The drug trade is very much alive and well all across this, great nation of ours, unfortunately. And, but we need to do what we can to, mitigate its effects on the everyday citizen.
And we have partners in the Nevada Division of Investigation, is that right? Narcotics Investigation?
Elko Combined Narcotics Unit, yes.
Yes. And so I think Chief Troughton talked about that as well. In fact, the only correction he was going to make to the report is that there have been more drugs seized as a result of the work that not only the work that the Crime Suppression Unit, because you were able to close during 7 months 64 cases, make 64 arrests, assisting other entities 90 times, serving 40 warrants. I mean, the list goes on, but also seized several hundred grams of suspected drugs, from methamphetamine to heroin, cocaine, and pills.
Yeah, so specifically the ECNU, 9 pounds of methamphetamine, 3.8 pounds of heroin, cocaine, and another category of 1,014 dosage units. So, and that's just what made the report. So there's quite a bit out there.
Yeah, there is quite a bit, and it is an ongoing issue, and that's just the amount that was apprehended. So you can imagine if people had more awareness and that they were able to take more care, right?
Right, and one of the things that go along with the drug trade too is firearms, and the ECNU detective seized 20 firearms related to drugs, and a lot of those have been identified as being stolen, and that continues to today.
Yeah, I saw the photograph. There's a photo contained in the report. You can find the Elko Police Department's annual summary online. As we're talking with Lieutenant Rick Moore, he described, you can find that attached to the Elko City website, and you can download a copy, you can read it, but it's really informative. But it does show a photo, and it looked like a lot of those were sort of automatic weapons. Would you think it's fair to say?
Well, they're AR-15 platforms, semi-automatic rifles.
Right. So it means that I guess what it would suggest is that not only are these readily or widely available, but if they're stolen, there's a particular problem with people not securing this kind of property, would you say? Or
Yeah, so I never want to, victim blame and say that, it's your fault that your house gets broken into. But as a responsible gun owner, there is measures that you should be taking to secure your weapons inside your home, yeah.
Yeah, would you say a gun safe is the best way, or?
I would say that, yeah, I would.
Yeah, a lot of times people will they will place their long guns especially, but under a bed because they think they fit there, or they put them in a closet. But that's usually the first place a thief will look, right?
Yeah, that, or in the dresser next to the nightstand,
Handguns.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. So it is an important thing to do to secure those firearms so that you can maintain control of them, because that is obviously the ultimate goal. And if you have any questions, I know that all the professionals at Gun World would love to talk to people about responsible gun ownership and gun locks and all the different ways that you can, I was reading a really interesting report, and I think it was in the Atlantic, Lieutenant, about, the misconceptions of gun ownership, even nationwide, and where the majority of gun deaths are occurring, whether violent homicides or suicides, domestic violence, that type of thing. And actually, as compared to the rest of the country, we don't have as much in the West because there is a different mentality, according to this article that I read.
And I would agree with that. I mean, a lot of us, we grew up around guns, and there's not that novelty, I guess, if you're not, something you've never been around and you come across it. I think there's a novelty there. And a lot of us grew up with them. I mean, they're in our trucks, we're out hunting, that kind of thing. And so I think you do see more of a different mentality around firearms.
Yeah, there's a seriousness and a responsibility, and maybe not as much fear, just more about education. And these are tools,
right.
Just like
That's it.
Yeah. It's not something. So anything that firearms owners can do to help, maintain a positive reputation and securing your firearms would be great, because these 20 firearms that Elko Combined Narcotics Unit detectives seized in 2022, they had a street value of $30,650. So that's certainly one thing to motivate a firearms owner too, is the cost of those. Let's see, other types of, another place where we may have seen an increase, and I'm just trying to see if that is true or reflected in the report, but it is an ongoing issue, Lieutenant, is our reports of domestic violence, and we're seeing more of that. It
is, and going back to, drugs and alcohol fuel a lot of that. We do have resources. We have the community Citizens Against Domestic Violence resources out there. There's a resource card that you can pick up actually here. Mm-hmm. Lots of push for awareness, but that is a recurring problem. And unfortunately, there is a cycle there that we need to be better as a community to break.
Absolutely. Committee Against Domestic Violence provides 24-hour help. They have a crisis line in the Harbor House shelter. They provide advocacy, and it's not just for victims of domestic violence, but people who are seeking referrals and information. We were talking about this just before we went on the air with our Lieutenant Rick Moore, that often domestic violence victims have a number of reasons why they can't leave an abusive relationship or situation. They may have children. There are financial reasons. That's often the most pressing burden. And frankly, sometimes they want to take their pets with them. So,
yeah, what I'll say to that, and I've spoken to many domestic violence victims over the years, is understand you're not alone. There are resources out here. The obstacles that you're facing, those are real, tangible obstacles, and you're not the first person to face that. There are people out here to help you. There are mechanisms, there are avenues that are available to you that you just need to reach out and avail yourself to me and able to take those.
You know what, Rick, in the 20 years you've been both a patrol officer and then, an investigator, a detective, and now a lieutenant, do you have the satisfaction of knowing that you've been able to really help people?
You never really know. Every once in a while you do hear, somebody comes and thank you, and you never get the full story. A lot of times they'll be, go to court or won't go to court or whatever the case may be. But every once in a while, several years later, they, pick you out of the grocery store or whatever and tell you the rest of the story. And that's where the satisfaction of this job really comes in.
Mm-hmm. And that's really a good segue, too, just to remind people that, some of us were taught as children that police officers were there to help us. And we go through this, we're going through this in our country right now where not everybody feels that way. And there are some good reasons, obviously. And you feel the same way I do about my profession. It's horrifying when you realize how much someone has violated the public trust when they have taken something and done something within the confines of either of our professions.
That's right. I mean, we live in a time period now where somebody, an officer, a bad officer in, Minneapolis affects us immediately here. I mean, and that's nationwide. So when somebody, tarnishes the badge, thousands of miles away, we feel that. And, we definitely, everybody feels that, viscerally when something like that occurs. There's no excuse for it.
So do know that we have Elko police officers and professionals in our community and within the Elko County Sheriff's Office, Nevada State Police. I mean, the list goes on, parole and probation, juvenile services. We were just talking about that too, Lieutenant, that you don't have as difficult a time recruiting people. Sometimes people are coming to you, to the Elko City Police Department in search of employment.
So our staffing levels, we've struggled. Last year we weren't able to hire anybody. Now we're able to actually be hiring people. What we're facing right now is, and I've heard this echoed across the nation with a lot of different agencies, is we're essentially cannibalizing other agencies, unfortunately, to staff because we don't see a very deep pool of applicants wanting to initially get into law enforcement. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. But that's something as a profession we have to overcome to go forward in the future. We have been able to staff several positions with our department, but at the cost of other agencies, and some of those have been local. Yeah,
that is something that the police department is going through, and it does impact, as you said, local agencies, whether the state police, which they have their own issues related to pay, equity, and that's being addressed, I think, in the legislature. Governor Lombardo is committed to increasing that pay. And in corrections, we've also seen challenges there, and even within the sheriff's office. And we know that the sheriff's department and the police department have traditionally worked very closely together, Lieutenant, and there's nothing that would change that, I'm sure.
No, I don't believe so. I believe we have a very strong relationship with the sheriff's office. We rely on them heavily as they do us. For our weaknesses, they have their strengths, and for our strengths, we're able to pull together.
Right, and that's why we have these combined agencies, as we just talked about, Elko Combined Narcotics Unit. There's a SWAT response that also...
We have an Elko Special Response Team that are staffed by Elko police officers and Elko Sheriff's deputies, absolutely. And I only see it getting better for the future.
Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of opportunities for these agencies to come together. And do you recall, because you've been with the department, as you said, for 20 years, when the city council commissioned something known as a matrix study, right?
That's correct.
Lieutenant? And what was that process like?
So there was, essentially it was commissioned to identify weaknesses and places where we could go, just do business better, essentially. And as far as from my experience, it was an outside agency or an outside, fact-finding group that came in and asked a series of questions and pretty much interviewed everybody in the department and made suggestions on how to be better and where to go forward. We went from our 8-hour schedule to 12 hours. I mean, that was just one part of it, but there was a lot of things that were laid out that this is the roadmap to get better and go forward in the future. And my understanding is, like, pretty much everything that we've were said this is the identified weaknesses that actually been checked off, and it's helped us out greatly.
So I was just going to ask you that. Does that mean, does it feel better? Do you think that improved morale at the police department? Not that it was ever terrible, but...
I do. There was, obviously growing pains, but growing pains aren't necessarily bad. I think that as a department, we're a lot stronger than we were, a decade ago. And like I said, I only see this getting better.
Yeah, we have a nice new police department, right?
Yeah, about 6 years old now. Going from a repurposed old LDS church into an actual purpose-built building that was a boost in morale. I think not only just for the officers that work there, for the public that have to come in there. We have ADA compliance and actual interview rooms and enough bathrooms, that kind of thing. So it's been a huge boon.
Oh, that's good to know. It's always nice to check in and to thank the community for helping to build the new police station, obviously,
Very
at the
much
time.
so.
Yeah. Well, we know the city fire department is going through a matrix report right now, so, wishing them the best, and hopefully they'll have just as much success with their effort, too.
Absolutely.
So of other things that kind of jump out, we do know that the Great Basin Child Advocacy Center is nearing completion, and that will be opened in June. We spoke with Tyler Ingram and Tanya Yell about that, and that's a big collaborative effort too, and wanted to give you a chance, Lieutenant, to talk about it, because as a former detective, you know how serious this problem is.
So that's a game changer, and I'll tell you why. So there was a time period where we would have a child sexual assault victim. I remember one incident specifically where she was sexually assaulted. It was like 2:00 in the morning, and there's an exigency to collect that evidence, unfortunately. And I had to have this little girl bundle up with her family and drive in the middle of the night to Reno, because that was our nearest area that we're able to effectively collect that evidence and handle that case like it needed to be handled, so we can get an effective prosecution. With the Child Advocacy Center coming on board, it's huge, not only for the city of Elko, but for the surrounding community. The impact that's going to have on the lives of these, victims and everybody that surround, their family is, you can't put a price on that. So I'm very, very, very happy to see that come to fruition.
Well, I'm sure that it was a result of not only your efforts, but Lieutenant, because that's the kind of dedication and the testimony that people need to hear.
Tyler Ingram, he's very integral. Detective Marshowski, huge. There's a lot of players involved. The entire MDT, multidisciplinary team. Just there can't be enough said for that.
I don't know if you ever had the pleasure of meeting Connie Walker, but when I first came to the community, you nodded to hear her name, yeah?
Yeah, I worked with Detective, became Bowers. She ended up
That's
there.
right.
That's right.
Yeah.
She was the one that handled those crimes when I first started. So, and I saw the struggles. If she was given the resources that we have now, and with the CAC coming on board, it's hard telling what she would be able to do. She was phenomenal. Yeah,
she absolutely was phenomenal. I like to think about people that were here before us and doing these things and really actually paved the way, because that's the other thing that our district attorney, Tyler Ingram, he had to go out a few times to justify why we needed this facility. It's quite expensive at $6 million. It's mostly private money that's being invested because we need it. People don't understand that this is happening.
Yeah, unless you're personally affected by this, I don't think you really feel the gravity of what this is able to accomplish. Hopefully, the people listening aren't personally affected by that, but rest assured that the people in your community that are going to finally get the attention that they absolutely deserve and need.
And it helps to strengthen the case against the perpetrator.
100%.
Yeah, because we also need to stop that. That's a cycle, just like anything else.
Very much so, yeah. We've seen, unfortunately, that people that are victims oftentimes become perpetrators. And, where do we break that cycle? We got to start at the victim stage and hopefully stop the progression into the perpetrator.
Absolutely. And by doing that with care and the compassion that we have as a community, that we can certainly break those kinds of cycles. We're talking with our Elko Police Lieutenant Rick Moore. He is here on behalf of our local law enforcement, just talking about some of the issues and the annual report. The police department summary came out. I want to make sure we're getting to some of the talking points that you were hoping to in particular, Lieutenant.
That a lot of it. I mean, the Crime Suppression Unit, I think, is going to be really, really huge for us. It augments our patrol staffing, and they do the best they can, but they are kind of playing. The analogy would be a zone defense as far as crime, and our Crime Suppression Unit are able to play more man to man. We know who the offenders are that are reoffending. We know what we need to do to take them off the street and hopefully stop them victimizing the citizens of Elko. And we're looking forward to see what they can accomplish in the future. We have the right people in those positions. We're about to put another person on next month. We're just waiting for one person to get off of field training, so we're able to maintain the staffing, so we're not running into issues with time to response to crimes or officer safety issues. But it's going to be good.
Because this involves a type of surveillance and more intensive follow-up.
Yeah, so really the sky's the limit. Yeah, with surveillance, we have trackers we could put on a bicycle downtown, so that bicycle you sitting by itself, don't take it. It might be put there by the police. We just, if there's that lingering thought in somebody that's wanting to commit a crime, because we run into smash and grabs and things like that. Laptops sitting in a car in the middle of a parking lot, break the window, take the laptop out. If there's that idea that potentially that's not a real laptop that's put there by the police or something, maybe if anything will stop that. And you can't quantify negative results, but if we are dropping some of these crime areas down and seeing, because we're seeing the fruition of that and some of the fruits of what they've accomplished with just the numbers in just their infancy stage. So exciting.
So again, if you see something, say something. We know it's kind of a bumper sticker slogan at this point, but it could really make the difference in helping to resolve or prevent, to suppress some of the crimes, the property crimes. We do see that citizens get frustrated, Lieutenant, and it's always a good idea to remind people that there is a process. It's the balance of the judicial system. We have to provide evidence. People have Fourth Amendment rights.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's paramount. I mean, the Constitution exists for a reason, and we want to make sure we're doing things the right way.
So everything you can do to help law enforcement, and that includes protecting your own personal private property too. Secure things, as Lieutenant suggested, don't leave things lying in plain sight, in your vehicle. People tend to get lax, when you're shopping, you walk away from your cart and leave your purse or your wallet, because sometimes people just reach in and take your wallet.
Yeah, I mean, we still hear, Elko's a small community, which it is. We're a good community, a safe community, in relation to a lot of the, places around the country. But it just takes one time. You just don't know, unfortunately.
Well, probably the last topic that I have, and doesn't involve police directly, in that it's in the hands of the city council right now, but for several months, we've learned during Tuesday's council meeting that the city staff has been fielding complaints about a particular property at 8th and Idaho. It's known as the Elko Inn, and it is a motel, but it has apparently become a haven for alleged drug abusers, people who are squatting, who, for whatever reason, cannot be evicted. And that's created a lot of concerns and generated a lot of police calls, Lieutenant.
It has. We've had several arrests out of there. I don't want to get too specific because I don't know what is pending as far as litigation concerns. But it is identified. It's right on, Main Street. It's right on Idaho Street. This is, people live around there. We're having complaints about garbage buildup and, drug trafficking. And like I said, there have been arrests out of there. I don't know what the end result's going to be. I have an idea where it's going. But just understand that from a police perspective, we're trying to, one, do this the right way, and two, it's identified. It's something that we're working on, and hopefully come to a good conclusion for everybody involved.
And that's the process that the lieutenant described, is what the city council is now going to be tracking. It's known as establishing a public nuisance. The city attorney is working on it. He has staff especially dedicated to it. It obviously has been at the attention of the staff level, and the owner of the property is out of state, so that has complicated issues. But it's probably important to let people know, Lieutenant, that police are aware, and you have been doing everything within the law, everything you're capable of doing to respond to that situation.
We are. And if somebody has a concern, they see something like we've talked about, feel free to call us. If anything, it gets recorded and, can only help the city in their assessment, to be honest.
Yeah, because I think more than 50 calls to that property, I think just since the beginning of the year is what they were saying.
That sounds right. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that sounds about right.
Yeah, so about 50 calls. And remember, you can call 911. I've had to call the number or even the non-emergency number many times myself, and being a resident here for just various things. And I'm always apologetic. And the dispatchers are very kind and professional and very thorough, and they appreciate the information. And usually an officer is dispatched within a very short period of time, Lieutenant, and people should have pride in that. That's our good stewardship of our city. We're paying our taxes, and we want to support you for supporting us.
Absolutely. We want to keep our response times low. When we're talking about staffing, that was one of the things that, kind of alluded to. But never feel bad about calling 911 or non-emergency dispatch number 777-7300. So if it's not an emergency, please call that number. But never feel bad. That's obviously what we're here for. This is what you pay us for, and we're happy to do it.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant. If it's an animal control issue, 775-777-7300, non-emergency. Any kind of emergency, obviously day or night, please call 911. Have as much information, try to stay calm. It's not always easy for people if there's been an accident, an emergency, a fire, but go through that with your kids, help them understand that they need to know their address and their phone number and be able to report the most basic information if they need to call in case of an emergency.
That's right. It's good advice.
All right. Lieutenant, did we get to all the topics today you were hoping to?
I think so.
I think we did. And you did a great job flying solo today. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us for today's edition of Elko Live here on KELK, featuring our Elko City Police Lieutenant Rick Moore with an update in local law enforcement news.